In the freezing winter of December 1940, Britain looked strong on the world map. But behind closed doors, the country was close to collapse. The Battle of Britain had been won in the air, yet German bombs were still falling on London and major industrial cities. Factories burned, ports were damaged, and supply lines were under constant attack. To the public, Britain appeared defiant and unbreakable, but inside government war rooms, leaders knew a dangerous truth. The country was running out of money. At the center of this crisis was Winston Churchill, the man whose speeches inspired resistance across Europe. Late at night, deep inside underground bunkers, Churchill sat down to write a letter that could decide Britain's fate. It was addressed to Franklin D. Roosevelt, the President of the United States. This was not a victory letter, it was a confession. Churchill had to admit that Britain, once the world's richest empire, was nearly bankrupt. Before the war, Britain was a financial powerhouse. It held massive gold reserves and owned valuable investments across the globe. British money financed railways in South America, mines in Africa, and factories in the United States. London was the heart of global banking and insurance. But modern war changed everything. World War II was not fought with small armies and limited supplies. It was a machine war. It burned through steel, oil, food, ammunition, and money at a pace no one had imagined. Britain depended heavily on imports, especially food and raw materials. When Germany blocked Europe and attacked shipping routes, Britain had only one place to turn: the United States. But America was officially neutral. US law allowed Britain to buy weapons, planes, and supplies only under one condition: cash and carry. Britain had to pay in cash upfront and transport everything on its own ships. There were no loans, no credit, gold only. For a time, Britain paid. Gold bars and valuable assets were quietly shipped across the Atlantic in a secret operation to keep purchases going. But by late 1940, the gold was almost gone. British officials in Washington had contracts ready for tanks and aircraft. They could no longer afford to sign. That was when Churchill sent his letter. Britain could fight on, but it could not pay any more. Roosevelt understood what was at stake. If Britain fell, America would eventually stand alone against Nazi Germany. But he faced a political problem. He could not simply hand over money. American voters would see that as charity. So his administration designed a solution that looked like business, not aid. This idea became known as Lend-Lease. Publicly, Lend-Lease was explained as a neighborly favor. If your neighbor's house is on fire, you lend him a hose. You don't sell it, but behind the scenes. The deal was far tougher. US Treasury officials demanded proof that Britain had nothing left to sell. They forced Britain to liquidate overseas assets, including profitable American companies. At fire sale prices, Britain had no leverage. Without American support, it would lose the war. At the same time, Britain needed naval protection. German submarines were sinking merchant ships faster than Britain could replace them. Britain asked for old American destroyers. The US agreed, but not for free. In exchange, America received long-term leases on British military bases across the Atlantic and Caribbean. This gave the United States a massive strategic footprint and marked a major shift in global power. By the time Lend-Lease officially began in 1941, Britain had been stripped financially. The gold was gone, investments were sold, strategic bases were leased. Lend-Lease kept Britain alive, but it came with conditions. One clause required Britain to open its empire to free trade after the war. This meant removing protections that had kept British industries competitive for generations. It quietly set the stage for the end of the British Empire as an economic system. When the war ended in 1945, Britain expected relief. Instead, the aid stopped almost overnight. Ships carrying food and supplies were ordered to turn back. Britain was suddenly bankrupt again, this time in peace. The country had to borrow money just to avoid hunger. The loan came with harsh terms, including opening the British currency to global markets, which quickly drained what little financial strength remained. The result was decades of austerity. Living standards fell, the pound lost value. Britain went from global leader to Dependent ally. The final payment on the post-war loan was not made until 2006, more than 60 years after the war ended. This is the hidden financial cost of victory. Britain won the war militarily, but it lost its economic independence. The United States emerged stronger than ever. Its factories untouched, its gold reserves overflowing. Power did not change hands through conquest. It changed hands through contracts, loans, and balance sheets for investors, entrepreneurs, and policymakers today. The lesson is clear: cash flow matters more than appearances. Even the strongest empires can fall if they run out of liquidity. War, crisis, and survival often force decisions that shape the future for generations. This is the kind of financial history they don't teach in textbooks, but it explains how today's world was built. If you want to understand how money, power, and strategy really work behind the scenes, subscribe to Next Gen Finance and stay one step ahead of the curve.